Uh, Today, we've got an interesting guest here on the show who's going to talk about his journey on how business technology skills helped him to see an overall mature picture of how enterprises work. So we've got Navneet Thillaisthanam here, who's actually a senior program manager at Mercedes-Benz R&D division in Bangalore. So he's going to talk about his journey on how mixing business with technology skills is quite important as you progress in your careers. And he currently works, his core area of expertise is cybersecurity and everything around cybersecurity, and from an enterprise perspective. Navneet, welcome. First of all, do brief on your journey to an extent, and then how's the business technology workshop that we did help you get into a better frame of mind to understand things from an enterprise perspective that helped you become a good decision maker, progress as a senior technology professional.
Hi, Kiran. Thanks. Pleasure being on the session today. So, you know, just a quick recap of what makes me the professional is I have been blessed in being in cybersecurity all along, and all through my formative years, being in cybersecurity, the more hands-on role, and now moving into more of the influencer kind of a role. What I felt was disconnecting between my work on the security space versus the enterprise objectives and goals was the transition of understanding how security and technology really helps businesses achieve what they want to achieve. And that was around the time when I began the exploration of what do we need to make that whole translation, or so-called put the links in the chain together, was when I discovered the the whole TOGAF program. And that's where we eventually did meet, right? And what it crucially helped me with is tie back how cybersecurity essentially helps in you establishing your enterprise architecture, because it is inevitable in today's day and age that businesses have to rely on IT. And my organization is exactly the same. We are in fact looking to make a lot more of our developments and products that either is developed over software platforms, or offers a lot more of software integrated platforms for experiencing the vehicles that we make. And that's where this whole program was helpful, because we now were able to have conversations that tightly wove how cybersecurity is relevant in ultimately helping us achieve the next generation of cars that we are making.
Okay. So basically, it helps you to drive strategy all down to the execution blocks when you can break them up into building blocks and
Mhm.
roll out the architecture.
True.
As I said.
And crucially also do the bottom to up conversation, right? Because when I reach out to a certain person saying you have to fix these vulnerabilities, or here's a big gaping hole from a security standpoint, it's now that much more easier for me to have that communication with them, because it's not just some cybersecurity guy coming in, giving me a pain and upsetting my daily schedule. But now they also realize that how these things actually go back into us making our the next generation of vehicles.
Okay. So what do you think people actually lack when they transition into roles from a solutioning role to a strategy role? What do you think are the skills that are needed to help you understand the business perspective of things, and then how can you use technology in good measure to leverage this in preparing effective customer solutions? So what do you think is being the miss in a lot of places, and unless you get a good mentor or a boss, perhaps that it doesn't address that challenge. So where do you think lies the problem?
So I think right now the issue that I predominantly face is when people who translate from, as you said, from the solutioning role to more of the strategist role, is there is a general I wouldn't like to use the word a lack of awareness, but it's more because of just how the structures are. But people who go into the strategic role take a long time into understanding or making the transition from being the solutions people to the strategy people, right? And that's I think where crucially the problem is, because while they are doing the solutioning, I fundamentally believe that the strategy should be something that they talk about, not just the solutions. So that's what I would sum it up as, right? Like while you are doing the solutions building, the strategy of the organization should be communicated very strongly to every level, so that they
Okay.
are aware of what not only what they are building, but why they are building.
Okay, okay, okay. So, from a cybersecurity standpoint, how do you think the enterprise architecture body of knowledge helps you to get a grip on the way in which you can execute the roadmap or come to an effective, realistic roadmap, saying, okay, this is what we do in this quarter versus this, and that kind of stuff. So, what's been your experience mixing the enterprise architecture world with the cybersecurity side of things?
Mhm. So there are a couple of viewpoints that I would like to bring about here, right? So the concept of enterprise continuum that TOGAF propagates is essentially something that exists in the ISO 27001 world as well, which is pretty much the defining standard that we cybersecurity guys rely upon to develop the whole cybersecurity program. When I was not aware of TOGAF, it was all about, hey, 27,001 this, 27,001 that. And then when we were talking to the teams and the businesses that were expected to implement 27,001, they never saw that as something that aligned to their strategy. So it was always seen as a waste, if you are talking in the lean concept, to even do the whole maturity of cybersecurity that we were driving. Post the TOGAF world, what I was able to tie it down, if you also look at the whole, the cycle that we have, that TOGAF promotes, we were able to now start laying down the 27,001 requirements across the various phases. And
Okay,
that's why
okay,
people were like, we are able to now relate it better, because as an organization, I already understand the benefit that TOGAF brings me. And when you are tying back the 27,001 to TOGAF and slicing it in a way that you're putting some of the components when you're looking at your application phase, or some of the components when you're looking at the data phase, it becomes so much more for holistic for them to go along with cybersecurity. So that's I think the key viewpoint that has helped me.
okay,
The
okay.
second aspect of it was, where you have the most generic architectures to the more specific one. So in 27,001, when we are rolling out those controls, we have the more generic controls for, like the most loosely fit kind of use cases. And then when we are going more specific into some of the, very specific issues that we are trying to address, the same concept of the enterprise continuum also helps us in driving those conversations as well.
Okay, okay, okay. So, how do you? I think it gives a good placeholder for you to worry about things, right? Because the ADM is in a structured fashion, and as you said, if you know the 27,000 control objectives, you know, okay, where to place the strategic decisions, where to put the control objectives, where do you put the ones across data, business, application, technology. So, I think it's a well structured framework so that you get a good placeholder as to where your concerns should be about worrying those things, and that kind of stuff. So how do you think that has helped in trying to relate the reality versus what's there out there in the organizations, because frameworks are always great on paper, but when it comes to executing them, what do you think are the challenges that actually help people in terms of rolling out those things? What do you think has been the inertia, organizational inertia behind these kind of things?
So typically, I think as with any programs, right, and because these are essentially, not the doing part, but more of the overseeing part, whether it was TOGAF or 27,001, we always had these, uh, I mean, you're using your same word, the inertia about figuring out where the translation happens, right? Where does it go from being a strategic initiative to, being the actual solutioning or the operational initiative? And what has really helped sometimes is, when we look at, let's say, the 27,001 framework, it enforces that you are periodically also checking where you stand, and there's this whole aspect of revisiting the whole premise, and that's essentially what TOGAF also promotes. So the inertia that we face, once we are able to overcome that by just either going through it by force or by true participation of the people involved, the rigor continues to stay up because people are now able to go from the very high level to the very low level. And then the one in between is something that we well, at least in my opinion, so far it's worked out. We haven't really come across a situation where it's completely broken down for me.
Okay, okay, okay. Fine. So how do you think the course helped you elevate your mind to thinking closely in terms of making sure that the business IT disconnect is not very far away, and the apple doesn't fall too far away from the tree when you say if you're trying to connect the business and IT together. So how do you think that has actually helped you? The course has helped you to understand the maturity of how you're driving initiatives in the organization. What are the pain points and challenges? So what do you think are the key takeaways that you have seen actually?
So the key takeaway for me is, the structure that TOGAF gives us with the business data application and technology viewpoints. What it helped me do is now not take 27,001 holistically to, to the teams and say, hey, you have 114 controls to implement. We could just break that down into saying how many of these are business considerations. So things like HR, things like senior leadership buy-in and organization structures, all that could be done as a part of the business work. And then when those teams would get into the application phase, we could start picking up those controls from 27,001 that are specific to the application space, right? So it allowed us to slice down the whole approach of 27,001 and sync it up with how the architecture development happens through the TOGAF model, the ADM. So that's where I think the key help happened to me, at least.
Okay, okay. So instead of saying here is an ocean out there, you are able to specifically pinpoint and say, okay, this is what you could take, and this is what we can pick and choose from the control objectives, map it to our requirements, and then probably revisit the later ones as and when it makes sense. All right.
Absolutely.
That kind of stuff. So how do you think what was the key benefit from the way the course was structured? That kind of stuff. So how did you feel about that?
So I think from the course that we did itself, right? So if you look at surely the TOGAF document itself, and that's actually pretty enormous in the sense that there are multiple dimensions that you have to know, and putting them all into a very understandable format was something that I found difficult. So specifically to the course that we did back in the office, it was very useful in the sense that you were able to break it down into the certain viewpoints that would actually make sense for us coming from more of the solutioning background, right? And that I think was crucial, because if I were to take an analogy here, you essentially showed us the dice by showing us one side at a time, and that helped us focus on one piece at a time. And then over the end of the whole training, we were able to then move the slide dice around by ourselves to get a better viewpoint or better understanding, and also take the framework and apply it into our work as we best thought it will fit in. So that's I think the key benefit that we had with the whole program that we did back at work.
Okay, perfect. And how do you think my white paper added value to your career professionally? Because I think that mixes the enterprise architecture world with the cybersecurity needs. So maybe if you can just talk a bit about that, I think that'll help others as well.
Mm. So I mean, I do admit now that some of the very details are a little fuzzy, but what I'll summarize that whole thing up as is essentially help me make that the translation from where cybersecurity stands towards where business technology stands, and make that connection, like draw the dotted line, or draw even the solid line, so to speak. And that manifested in me having more engaging conversations with my stakeholders when I wanted them to do cybersecurity. That's
Okay.
how I'll basically sum it as, right? It gave me the blueprint for the conversation, and then I had to do a little bit of tweaking to just put a little bit of the Mercedes-Benz touch to it.
Okay, okay, perfect. Finally, I think to keep it short, Navneet, just some parting words of advice from you into for people who actually looking for making this transition into business IT leadership and who want to move into being decision makers who are answerable for P&L and the IT expenses in terms of connecting business technology dots. What do you think? How should one prepare themselves for this journey? Because you've been part of that as well. So, what's your list of things that you would ask them to do definitely?
So I'll just borrow a phrase from Steve Jobs here, where he said,
One
"You
second, one
connect
second,
the
one
dot."
second, one second. Yes, Navneet, please go ahead.
So I would, in fact, just borrow the phrase from Steve Jobs here, where he said rather famously that you
Stay
connect the
hungry,
dot
stay foolish.
backwards. No, actually, connect the dot backwards, right? Because when to be honest, when I was actually going through the whole TOGAF thing, I couldn't really make out on how that whole thing would be relevant for me at a daily level. But once having gone through it, and as I said, once you develop your perspectives and your viewpoints, it really helps in you now putting in perspective your daily work and your initiative versus what the company needs, and how the company is seeking to transform as well. So it gives you that viewpoint, but then it kind of develops on you, right? So you wait for the dots to all be there on your paper, and then you connect them back. That's how I would wrap it up.
But what was the Steve Jobs connection? I didn't connect with that. What is that?
So he apparently in some speech once said that you connect the dot backwards. You can't
Ah,
connect them
okay, okay,
forward.
okay,
So you
okay.
basically just go back connecting them.
Oh,
So
okay,
that's how
okay,
you build the story aspect.
okay, okay, okay. Great. I think yes. On that lovely note, we'll end this short conversation, Navneet, and wishing you all the best in all your endeavors. And we'll be in touch, of course, for sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for talking to me, and have a nice day.